What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be taking a deep look at flinch and flinch resistance attachments in Black Ops 6 to see how bad flinch is and whether or not you should be using these attachments to help reduce the amount of flinch that you experience. And diving right in, just like all of the recent years of Call of Duty, your flinch value in this game is determined by not only the gun that the enemy is using, but also largely the gun that's in your hand. So those are the two main elements we're going to be looking at today, and then of course we will be seeing how effective the heavy stock is, since that's the key universal attachment across the board that can be used to reduce the flinch that you experience. And let's first start this off showing what it looks like being shot by different types of weapons that have a different target flinch value. So in this case, I'm using the same gun in my hands, which is the XM4. This is without the heavy stock, of course. And the only thing that's changing here is the gun that I'm being shot by. In this first case, I'm being shot by an XM4, which has quite a low target flinch value in this game at 0.7 newtons. And then the second clip here, this is with the DM10, which has a flinch value of 1.2 newtons. And as you can see, there is a clear difference in the amount of flinch you experience depending on which of those guns the enemy is using. Now, at the end of the day, both of these flinch values are pretty reasonable in a lot of gunfights unless you're actively aiming for the head. If you're just aiming center mass, this isn't going to be enough flinch to actually throw you off target most of the time, unless you're at really long ranges. However, I did also want to show what a sniper rifle would look like if they shot you and didn't get a one-shot kill. So if they shot you in the leg, for instance, while you're using an XM4, you're going to flinch even more, and that's the highest flinch value I have in the game at 1.5 newtons. So that just goes to show sort of the range of impact that the enemy can have on you depending on which gun they're using. For the rest of this video, we're now going to be focusing more on the weapon that's in your hand. So from here on out, I'm only being shot by an XM4 since I would say the vast majority of players in this game are using either an assault rifle or an SMG, and I just wanted to keep things simple and consistent across the board here. So we'll start this off with an assault rifle in my hand with the XM4. We already saw these tests, but we're just doing a baseline here. And like we saw earlier, even if you're getting hit multiple times by the enemy players, you're generally not going to be thrown off target in the majority of gunfights I would say you find yourself in. But at really long ranges, or if you can only really see their head, yeah, maybe this will throw you off. Now, it's also worth noting, based on my tests, LMGs appear to have the same flinch resistance value as the assault rifles, or at least it's close enough that you can't really tell a difference even when looking zoomed in frame by frame. And it is a bit unfortunate, unlike Modern Warfare 3, they don't show us our flinch resistance value in the game, they only show us how much flinch we're dealing to enemy players. But like I said, as far as I can tell, assault rifles and LMGs seem to be at least roughly the same. Then with an SMG, if you're taking a super close look, you can see you flinch a little bit more if you've got an SMG in your hand compared to an assault rifle in your hand. And it turns out that also applies to shotguns. And in the case of shotguns, that's really only going to matter if you're using slugs, but I thought I'd throw it in here anyway. It appears to be the same as SMGs. And another one that appears to be the same as SMGs is the pistol flinch. So just a little bit more than the assault rifle and LMG as far as I can tell, but not by a large margin. And again, I would still say that in most gunfights, this amount of flinch probably isn't going to be enough to change the outcome of a gunfight. After that, we have marksman rifles, and these ones definitely flinch more than the previous classes we've looked at. In fact, I would say with the marksman rifles, especially since you tend to be using them at longer ranges, that's where they excel, this is where flinch can definitely start to become a more noticeable issue for you that will actually cause you to lose certain gunfights that you otherwise would have won if flinch wasn't present. So it's definitely something to consider with marksman rifles. You may want to be using attachments like the heavy stock to reduce that amount of flinch that you experience. But we will be looking at the heavy stock in greater detail in just a little bit. Before we do that though, we still have one last class to cover here, and this is sniper rifles. And sniper rifles definitely experience the most flinch in the game, as expected for balancing purposes. There's nothing more frustrating than pumping like 5 or 6 or 7 rounds into a sniper, only for them to just shoot you in one shot as if nothing happened to them. So flinch is the mechanic that's designed to help keep those balanced, so the more you are shooting a sniper, the more chance you have at least of throwing them off target. Doesn't mean they won't hit you, but you can see there's definitely a notable amount of flinch with sniper rifles to the point where you can throw them off target in many cases. So there we go. Those are all the different weapon classes and how you will react to being shot by an assault rifle at least. Again, just a reminder, the gun you were being shot by also does have an impact, so it's possible you will be flinching more than what I'm showing here, depending on what the enemy player is using. Now let's have a look at the heavy stock, and we're going to start this off with an assault rifle. Once again, we're just being shot by an assault rifle here. That part's not changing. And we're going to start this with the XM4, first without the heavy stock or any flinch resistance attachments, and then second, this is with the heavy stock equipped. And just looking at single shot flinch, you can definitely tell there is a difference there, but it doesn't really paint the whole picture as far as how this will impact a gunfight. I think it's much better to take a look at getting hit multiple times while not using this versus while using the heavy stock. And in this case, you can definitely see a lot more of a difference. And again, while I don't think this is a necessary attachment for something like an assault rifle, if this were a really long-range gunfight on somebody that's really effectively using cover, this could actually make a pretty big difference in that fight. Now, we see a really similar story using an SMG in our hands, but I would say especially with SMGs, you probably won't be getting into those longer range fights against people using cover all that often. You probably shouldn't be doing that. That's not what these guns are designed to excel at. So at least in my opinion, on an SMG, it is a bit of a waste to use a flinch resistance attachment because I don't think it's actually going to change the outcome of most of the gunfights you'll find yourself in. As for marksman rifles though, like we mentioned earlier, this is where flinch will actually start to come into play in many of your gunfights, at least in my opinion. So I want to dive a little bit deeper here, and I want to look at the base SWAT 5.56, then the combat stock, which gives us some flinch resistance, but not as much as the heavy stock, and then this final clip is with the heavy stock. And as you can see when we plot it out here, the combat stock doesn't really do that much to help with flinch resistance. Sure, it helps a little bit, but barely. Whereas the heavy stock definitely gives us the best possible improvement here. And I would say at least for many marksman rifle builds, unless you're designing it to be super aggressive for close quarters engagements, this is where I would start to recommend using the heavy stock since it can absolutely impact the outcome of a gunfight when using marksman rifles. And this finally leaves us with sniper rifles, and once again, we're going to be looking at the base LR762 with no flinch attachments. Then with the combat stock, you can see you're flinching a little bit less, but there's still a lot there. And then finally, with the heavy stock, you can see there is fairly minimal flinch for a sniper rifle at least. So it's definitely your best option. And in this case, we actually have the exact values from the patch notes for Season 1. With the combat stock, this will improve your flinch resistance by 18%, whereas the heavy stock will improve your flinch resistance by 48%. So definitely a much bigger improvement with the heavy stock. And I would honestly recommend using the heavy stock in a lot of situations with sniper rifles. Probably most of your sniper builds should be using the heavy stock because this is the type of thing that's going to come into play a lot in your gunfights if the enemy is shooting back before you get your shot off. And this is especially true because this time around in Black Ops 6, the opportunity cost trade-off for taking a heavy stock is pretty low. It's not directly competing against other attachments that can improve your aim down sight time, for instance, which is actually something I liked that Modern Warfare 3 did, is you could often really improve your aim down sight speed and therefore your ability to quickscope, but that would come at the cost of your flinch resistance value. It would hurt your flinch resistance. But in Black Ops 6, you don't have that same trade-off. And as a result, this is why the heavy stock is just a no-brainer, in my opinion, if you're sniping. And with that, that's finally going to wrap it up for today's breakdown on the flinch values in Black Ops 6. And overall, when it comes to my thoughts on this topic, I would say unless you're using sniper rifles or marksman rifles, generally speaking, you don't really need to worry about flinch all that much. Unless you're going for like a really accurate long-range assault rifle build, for instance, then maybe I could see throwing the heavy stock on there. But honestly, outside of that, I'd rather be strafing faster in gunfights by using like the infiltrator stock if I am using like an SMG or an assault rifle, for instance. With marksman rifles and sniper rifles though, this is where I'd actually recommend using the heavy stock more often than not, because at that point, it's really going to start to come into play very often for those guns. Now, of course, those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear from you guys in those comments down below. First off, how are you guys feeling about the state of default flinch in this game? And second, do you think the heavy stock is generally worth it? Do you use this on any of your class setups, or do you tend to stay away from it? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.